If DBD were real life, who would be the most terrifying antagonists? These are my thoughts. So the idea is, if I found myself in a real trial, who would I least want to find myself going against? Now, normally we would rank things D to S tier, but we're gonna switch things up a little bit tonight. I did another version of this video about a year ago, and so we're gonna reuse those tier names. Now, with the first tier, let's be honest. Anything trying to end you is gonna be terrifying no matter what. So our lowest tier is just gonna be plain old terrifying. Our next tier is just run away. Don't even try to stand your ground to fight, just do everything you can to escape. Next up is, this locker is my home now. I'm just hiding. There's no way I'm even coming out to face this thing. Then we have, I hope I brought my brown pants. And if you don't get that joke, I'm sure somebody in the comments will be happy to explain it to you. And the top tier is, end me now. These are those that I'd rather just put myself on the hook and get it over with than to try to face them. If you enjoy the video, can you let me know by hitting that like button? And comment down below who would be in your version of these tiers. So let's get started. Starting off our terrifying tier is Clown. Now, I don't personally have a fear of clowns, but for those of you who do, I imagine he would be a whole lot higher. But for me, he's just a creepy old dude. His tonics would be bad to deal with, but wouldn't make him necessarily more scary. Now, don't get me wrong, he's still terrifying, but on the whole roster, he's one of the least to me. Next up in this tier, we have Legion. Now, somewhat of this depends on if it was all 4 of them in the trial or not. Technically, in a standard DBD trial, there's only 1, but lore-wise, there should be all 4 of them, I would think. And that would be pretty horrifying and overwhelming. That said, they're still just young adults in creepy masks with knives. While terrifying, you could at least still fight back and maybe stand a chance. And to back up that idea a little bit, I think their Mori is the only one in which the survivor actually fights back. Next up, we have Ghostface, and he's similar to Legion, but there's only 1 of them. Now, he's a lot more stealthy, calculated, and patient than the Legion is, though. But ultimately, he's still just a dude in a mask with a knife. You could theoretically fight back. Next up, we have Trickster. And what makes him terrifying to me is he's totally nuts, but he's still one of the more grounded human characters in terms of abilities. What you see with him is what you get. Yes, it would still be scary, but with him, I'd probably try fighting back, unlike our next tier. This is the just run away tier. These are those I wouldn't even want to try fighting back with, I would just try to get away from. And the first one is Trapper. Now, I think I put Trapper in the terrifying tier last time, but I've since upped that. He's hulking and monstrous. One look at him, and I'm turning the other way. Having to watch out for bear traps would be horrible, and getting caught in one even worse. Next up is Hillbilly, and the thought of getting hit by his chainsaw is just, utterly gut-wrenching to me. That alone bumps him up into the second tier in my mind. But let's be honest, you're not running away from him with his speed. Next up, we have Myers, and there's something deeply unsettling about him that puts him above the other dudes in a mask with a knife, for me. Just the way he stalks you, stares at you, and becomes this unrelenting, unstoppable force the longer the trial progresses. To me, that sets him up a tier. And then we have Bubba. Same reasons as Hillbilly. The chainsaw is just such an awful weapon. And his face mask, one look at that, and you know you're in trouble. Yeah, he goes up a tier. Next up, we have Slinger. At first look, Slinger kind of looks like an old dude with a limp. But thinking about getting hit with the Redeemer, getting reeled in and then bayoneted? Ugh, no thank you. Just get away. Next up in this tier, I have Twins. Seeing Victor jump out of Charlotte's chest would be next level disturbing. Plus his squeal is just unnatural. And Charlotte's weapon is kind of terrifying as well. For a basic weapon, it looks sick. Like, ugh, good night. It would hurt to get hit by that. It hurt to get hit by all of them, but especially that one. All right, to round out this tier, we have our newest character, the Skull Merchant. Now, I think the drones would be anxiety-inducing and would leave you with not very many places to hide. And she's somewhat stealthy, and her arm claw is incredibly intense. Just looking at that thing, it's huge. Ultimately, she's just a human, but her tech sets her up a tier in my mind. It would be better to try to get away than try to stand your ground with her. All right, next up is the tier, this locker is my home now. And the first one in this tier is Wraith. He's kind of like Trapper, but not being able to see him at all times would make it much more nerve-wracking. At least with a lot of the other ones so far, you'd have an idea when you weren't actually in imminent danger. But with Wraith, you might think you're okay, only to find that he's directly behind you. Plus his weapon is just gruesome. One look at that and you know you're in trouble. And the bell just adds another element of terror. Imagine that thing going off right behind you. I mean, yeah, pretty awful. Next up we have Pig. Now by herself, she's again, just a person in a mask with a little more fancy of a knife. Disturbing, yes, but ultimately she's still just a human that you could stand your ground against. But for me, what sets her apart is her traps. That just adds a horrifying layer to it all. She's also stealthy and has that terrifying roar, so That would be pretty scary. But mostly it's the traps that terrify me. I would want absolutely nothing to do with those. Next up, we have Blight, and he is monstrous, and that would be pretty disturbing to see him in person. But beyond that, he's kind of like an oozy pinball that hits you with a cane. Yeah, that's gonna hurt, but I'd much rather get hit with that than a lot of the others coming up. But you're also not running away from him, so hiding is gonna be the best option. Next up, I have Wesker, and I know getting away from him is not gonna happen. He's too strong, too fast, and too smart. But I don't know why, but the fact that I could actually converse with him makes him slightly less scary to me. I don't really know why, can't explain it, but it takes it down a tier for me. I guess it just makes him more personable or something. I don't know. All right, our next tier is I hope I brought my brown pants. And starting off this tier is Nurse. She's creepy as all get out with her slow dangling body just floating along. The sounds she makes are terrifying, and you're not safe behind walls or obstacles. Next up in this tier is Hag. Okay, she's very creepy for sure. The way she moves, the way she sounds. But what puts her in this tier for me is her traps. 1 second you're sneaking around, you're being all stealthy, and then you trigger one of her traps and she's suddenly there, right on you, chasing you. Yeah, I'm gonna need some brown pants for that one. Next up we have Huntress. After reading her lore and about her taking out squads of soldiers while she wages psychological warfare on them with her lullaby, such that they're banding together, enemies are banding together to fight against her because they're just terrified of her, that makes me know she would be utterly horrifying to go against. I mean, she doesn't even need to worry about you knowing exactly where she is at all times because there's just no escaping from her. She's gonna hunt you down and get you while singing that creepy lullaby and laughing to herself. All right, next up we have Freddy in this tier. I mean, he's the literal stuff of nightmares. He's in control of the dream world and there's no anticipating what he's gonna do. And not being able to trust basic physical realities would be anxiety inducing. Next up in this tier, I have Demo. He's a massive monster with a Venus flytrap for a face, filled with teeth, and he can appear out of nowhere by traveling the upside down through his portals. Yeah, definitely brown pants worthy. All right, I know I'm gonna get flack for not putting Oni in the top tier, but my thinking with Oni is at least it would be quick. He's utterly terrifying, especially when he transforms, but aside from his Mori, which granted is incredibly brutal, when he catches up to you, it's gonna be over fast. So you're not gonna have that long to be scared. All right, next up in this tier is Nemesis. He's unstoppable unless you happen to have a STARS team member on your team to distract him with, but other than that, you're done for. You're not gonna get away from Nemesis. And after seeing what happens to Brad Vickers, his tentacle haunts my nightmares. What a weird sentence to say out loud. All right, next up we have Artist. She's creepy as all get out, being half human and half ink bird thing. The sounds she makes are terrifying, especially when she sends out a crow. And there's nowhere to hide that is safe from her. Brown pants worthy. To round out this tier, I have the Knight. Now I think having a regular Knight coming after you would be pretty scary, but the Knight, definitely more so, being somewhat otherworldly. Plus his crew of demented ghosts that can pass through walls as they hunt you, that knocks him up a notch too. You're outnumbered, like with the Legion, but they're also not bound by the laws of physics. Plus the sounds he makes as he stomps after you. Ugh. All right, now we get to our top tier, the Enemy Now tier. And the first one here is Doctor. Everything from his sick, twisted laugh to the first sight of him. A dude who's willing to do all that to himself? I mean, what's he gonna do when he catches you? He's just utterly horrifying. Next up, we have Spirit. You're in this horrifying place to begin with, and you hear this creepy sound just breathing around you, and then suddenly she phases into existence right in front of you. Her face is rapidly shifting between grief and rage, and her limbs are all separated but somehow floating together, and her broken sword suddenly appears from her arm with frightening speed. Yeah, Spirit is immensely terrifying. All right, next up is my main Plague. And I know all the metaphobics out there agree with me. The idea of a super tall lady vomiting all over you, instantly making you sick, yeah, that's unpleasant enough. But the real kicker for me is her corrupt purge. In-game, we all know it inflicts damage. But how do you think it does that? In my mind, it implies that this is very acidic. And so the idea of being melted like that dude in Indiana Jones from Plague's corrupt purge, yeah, that's a big nope from me. All right, next up I have Pyramid Head. Besides his massive knife, the rusty metal pyramid for a head, the trail of torment he leaves behind him, his cages of atonement, and the incredibly unnerving sounds he makes as he relentlessly pursues you. Yeah, he really is just kind of a giant teddy bear when you think about it. If that teddy bear was wrapped in supernatural rusty barbed wire, that is. All right, next up we have Pinhead. And I don't really need to explain this one, but I will anyway. He's an interdimensional demon who thinks pain is pleasure and does horrifying things to himself and his victims. Fun. No thank you. Next up we have Onrio. Now I've only seen the American ring, I haven't seen the Japanese Ringu, but the American version terrified me. And from what I've heard, the original is even worse. Just something about a psychic projection of a girl dressed in white with long black hair crawling out of a TV. It's just, ugh. She's just horrifying. And the sounds, ugh, awful. And completing our list is the Dredge. And honestly, of all the characters in this tier, I think Dredge might be the worst. He's an unstoppable black fog that is the incarnation of the worst human thoughts possible, with appendages made up of the flesh and bones of its victims. Teleports all over the map, descending the world into pitch black darkness as it hunts you, turning your safe space into very much not a safe space. And to make matters worse, once it catches you and digs its fangs into you, you're absorbed into that darkness, forever becoming a part of the Dredge itself. Yeah. Nope. So this is where I'd rank each of them. Let me know in the comments which ones you'd change around. And as always, you're awesome, stay awesome, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers. Next up in this tier is Nemesis, and he's gonna be... And her limbs are all separated and floating together like... Yeah. I don't know where I was going with that. Oh, praise God, I'm recording. I get 3/4 of the way into the video and I'm like, yeah, did I hit record? And her broken arm. She does have broken arms. He's an interdimensional... Change around.